The ancient air conditioner in Betty's diner wheezed and rattled against the oppressive July heat, its tired motor fighting a losing battle. Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, careful not to let the perspiration drip onto the coffee pot she was refilling. The clock above the grill read 1:47 a.m., and the Nebraska summer night pressed against the windows like a living thing, humid and relentless. She'd been on her feet for 14 hours straight, pulling a double shift after Jenny called in sick again. Her lower back ached, her feet throbbed in the worn sneakers that had seen better days, and the polyester uniform clung to her skin in all the wrong places. But she needed every dollar, every tip, every penny she could scrape together. Her phone buzzed against the counter where she'd left it, the screen lighting up with a notification that made her stomach drop. Final notice. The words seemed to glow with malicious intent. Sarah snatched the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened the message from her landlord. Rent due tomorrow by 5 p.m. or eviction proceedings begin. No extensions. The numbers on the screen blurred for a moment. 847. She had $312 in her checking account and maybe $30 in tips from tonight's pathetic turnout. The heat wave had kept most folks indoors, and those brave enough to venture out weren't feeling generous. "Damn it," she whispered, pressing her palms against her eyes. Tommy's face flashed in her mind, her 6-year-old son sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, trusting his mama to keep them safe, to keep them housed. What would she tell him if they had to sleep in the car again? How could she explain that sometimes trying your hardest still wasn't enough? The bell above, the door chimed, and Sarah quickly shoved the phone into her apron pocket, plastering on her professional smile. "Welcome to Betty's," she called out. Though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears, the man who entered brought with him a wave of humid night air that made the struggling air conditioner rattle even louder. He was tall, well-dressed in a way that seemed almost alien in this small Nebraska town. Dark slacks that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month, a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up just so, expensive leather shoes that hadn't seen a day of real work. His hair was perfectly styled despite the heat, silver at the temples, in a way that suggested distinguished rather than old. Marcus Vale. She didn't know his name yet, but she could see the wealth in every line of his posture, the confidence that came from never having to check your bank balance before buying groceries. He slid onto a stool at the counter, directly under the flickering fluorescent light that Betty kept meaning to replace. "Just coffee," he said, his voice carrying the slight rasp of a man accustomed to being heard the first time. "Iced, if you've got it." "Sure thing." Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, filling a tall glass with ice from the machine that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. Tonight, thankfully, it cooperated. She poured the coffee over the ice, watching the liquid darken and swirl. "Cream? Sugar? Black's fine." As she set the glass in front of him, Marcus pulled out his phone and placed it on the counter. Then, almost as an afterthought, he withdrew his billfold from his back pocket and set it down beside the phone. The leather was buttery soft, obviously expensive, and thick with cash. Sarah caught a glimpse of green as he opened it to pull out a 20, hundreds from the look of it. More money than she'd seen in one place in months. Her eyes lingered on the billfold for just a moment too long. Marcus was absorbed in his phone, typing rapidly, his brow furrowed in concentration. The diner was empty except for them, and Betty was in the back doing inventory. The only sounds were the labored breathing of the air conditioner and the soft click of Marcus's fingers on his phone screen. Sarah forced herself to look away, moving to wipe down tables that were already clean. But her gaze kept drifting back to that billfold, sitting there so carelessly, so temptingly close. $847. That's all she needed. Just a handful of those bills. And Tommy would have a roof over his head for another month. The rational part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive and working through 3 jobs and single motherhood and every other hardship life had thrown at her, screamed warnings. This was insane. This was taking without permission. This would ruin everything. But the desperate part, the part that had been growing stronger with each unpaid bill and each worried night, whispered different words. He wouldn't even notice. Look at him. This is pocket change. Tommy needs a home. Marcus's phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through the humid air. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this," he said, sliding off the stool. "Mind if I step outside? Better reception." "Of course," Sarah managed, her voice sounding strange and distant. He walked toward the door, the phone already pressed to his ear. Through the window, Sarah could see him pacing in the parking lot, gesturing as he spoke. His back was to the Udina. The billfold sat on the counter like a test from the universe. Sarah's hand moved without conscious thought, reaching across the laminate surface. Her fingers brushed the leather, surprisingly warm from the summer heat. "This is wrong," her mind whispered. "This is taking without permission. You're not someone who does this." But Tommy's sleepy smile flashed before her eyes, and her rent notice burned in her pocket. Sometimes good people had to do difficult things. Sometimes the world left you no choice. Her fingers closed around the billfold. "You chose the wrong thing to take." The voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it sent ice through Sarah's veins. Despite the sweltering heat, she spun around, the billfold still clutched in her hand, to find Marcus standing directly behind her. He'd moved with absolute silence, and now he stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. His hand covered hers before she could react, warm and surprisingly. Gentle but absolutely firm, not painful but inescapable. His eyes, a pale green that seemed to see right through her, held hers without blinking. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. He'd call the police. She'd be arrested, lose her job, lose Tommy. Everything would fall apart because she'd been weak for 30 seconds. She started, but the words died in her throat. "Give it back," Marcus said softly. Sarah's fingers unclenched, and the billfold dropped onto the counter with a soft thud. She waited for him to step back, to reach for his phone, to call for help. Instead, he studied her face with the intensity of a man trying to solve a puzzle. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the stool beside the one he'd vacated. "I should sit down." There was steel beneath the quiet words. Sarah sank onto the stool, her legs suddenly unreliable. Marcus moved around the counter, a casual violation of the boundary between customer and employee that somehow seemed perfectly natural for him, and poured himself a fresh cup of coffee. He offered her one with a raised eyebrow. Sarah shook her head. Her stomach was already twisted in knots. Marcus leaned against the counter across from her, close enough to touch, but giving her space to breathe. The air between them felt charged, electric in a way that had nothing to do with the summer storm building outside. Despite her fear, Sarah found herself noticing the way the fluorescent light caught the silver in his hair, the quiet strength in his movements as he set down his coffee cup. "Tell me why," he said. "Why what? Don't play naive. You're not naive, are you?" The question wasn't insulting, just matter of fact. "Tell me why you tried to take my billfold without permission." Sarah's first instinct was to lie, to make excuses, to minimize what had happened, but something in his steady gaze made dissembling feel impossible. This man would see through any story she tried to spin. "My rent," she said finally, the words coming out in a whisper. "It's due tomorrow, $847, and I don't have it." "So you decided to take from me?" "I wasn't—" Sarah stopped herself. Yes, she had been. There was no point in pretending otherwise. "Yes," Marcus nodded as if this made perfect sense. "You have a child." It wasn't a question. Sarah's blood chilled. How could he know that? How— The picture. He gestured toward her phone, which had fallen partially out of her apron pocket. The lock screen showed Tommy's gap-toothed grin from his school picture last spring. "Handsome boy, looks like you." Sarah's hand moved protectively toward her phone. "Leave him out of this." "I'm not pressuring him. I'm trying to understand the situation." Marcus took a sip of his coffee, seemingly unbothered by the tension crackling between them. Single mother working the graveyard shift at a diner in the middle of nowhere. Let me guess, you've got 2 other jobs, maybe 3, but you're still barely keeping your head above water. The accuracy of his assessment was unnerving. Sarah said nothing. "The American dream," Marcus continued, and there was something bitter in his voice now. "Work hard, play by the rules, and you'll be rewarded. Except sometimes the system is rigged from the start, isn't it?" Despite everything, Sarah found herself nodding. It felt good to have someone acknowledge what she'd been screaming silently for years, that she was drowning despite doing everything right. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Sarah." "Sarah," he repeated it slowly as if testing the sound. "I'm Marcus. Now, Sarah, I want you to think very carefully about your next answer. Are you someone who takes things that don't belong to them?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "No." "Are you sure? Because 5 minutes ago you were taking from me. I was desperate." Desperation makes people do things they never thought they would. But it doesn't change what those things are. Marcus set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "However, I'm not interested in destroying your life over a moment of poor judgment." Sarah's breath caught. "You're not calling the police?" "Not necessarily." Marcus smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made promises it might not keep. But there was something else there, too, a warmth that caught Sarah off guard, making her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "I believe in second chances, Sarah, but they come with conditions." The air in the diner suddenly felt thinner. "What kind of conditions?" Instead of answering immediately, Marcus pulled out his phone and checked the time. "It's almost 3 in the morning. Your shift ends soon?" "At 6. Good. That gives us time to discuss a business proposition." "I don't understand." Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on the counter, bringing himself closer to Sarah's eye level. The space between them crackled with a tension that was part danger, part something else she couldn't quite name. His voice dropped to just above a whisper. "I need someone I can trust to handle a simple job for me. Someone who understands what it means to need money badly enough to take risks. Someone with a child to protect. It provides excellent motivation for loyalty." Sarah's mouth went dry. "What kind of job?" "Nothing dangerous. A delivery, an envelope to an address across town. You take it, you hand it over, you come back. 2 hours of work, tops. And you'd pay me how much?" Marcus's smile widened, and for a moment Sarah forgot to breathe. $2,000. The number hit Sarah like a physical force. $2,000. More than twice her rent, enough to catch up on her electric bill, maybe even buy Tommy some new school clothes. "That's too much," she said automatically. "Nobody pays $2,000 for a simple delivery." Smart woman. "You're right, of course. It's not entirely simple." Marcus straightened, putting distance between them again, and Sarah found herself missing his closeness. "But it's not dangerous either. Just discreet." Every instinct Sarah had developed through years of surviving on her own screamed warnings. This was too good to be true. This was the kind of offer that came with strings attached, the kind that got people in trouble they couldn't get out of, but $2,000. Rent, utilities, groceries, maybe even a trip to the doctor for Tommy's persistent cough that she'd been putting off because they couldn't afford the copay. "I don't even know you," Sarah said weakly. "True, but you tried to take from me, which means you're already comfortable operating outside legal boundaries when the situation calls for it. And I'm offering you a way to solve your problems without committing an actual violation of law." Delivering mysterious envelopes isn't against the law? Not the way I do it. The words carried a weight that made Sarah's skin prickle. This man was dangerous, not in the way of random violence, but in the way of someone who operated by different rules than the rest of the world. Someone who could offer life-changing money for a few hours' work and make it sound reasonable. The bell above the door chimed again, and both Sarah and Marcus turned to see Betty emerging from the back room, her grey hair disheveled and her apron stained with whatever she'd been wrestling with in the kitchen. "Sarah, honey, I think we got a problem with the—" Betty stopped short when she saw Marcus, her eyes narrowing with the instinctive suspicion of someone who'd lived through 70. Years of men making promises they didn't keep. "Oh, didn't know we still had customers." "Just finishing up," Marcus said smoothly, pulling a 20 from his billfold, the same billfold Sarah had tried to take, and laying it on the counter. "Keep the change." It was a $15 tip on a $3 cup of coffee. Betty's expression softened slightly, but her protective instincts regarding Sarah remained sharp. "Sarah, you okay, honey?" "I'm fine, Betty. Just talking." Betty's gaze moved between them, clearly sensing undercurrents she couldn't quite identify. "Well, you holler if you need anything. I'll be in the back fixing that damn freezer." Disappeared through the swinging doors again, leaving Sarah and Marcus in their charged bubble of secrecy. "Protective," Marcus observed. "That's good. You'll want people looking out for you." The words sounded almost like a warning, but when Sarah looked at his face, she saw only genuine concern. It was confusing, this mixture of danger and care, the way he seemed to genuinely want to help her, even as he offered her something that felt like stepping off a cliff. "If I said yes," she said carefully, "when would this happen?" "Tonight. After your shift ends." "Tonight?" Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "That's soon. Time-sensitive business. But that works in your favor. Less time to worry, less time to talk yourself out of it." Marcus finished the last of his coffee and stood, pulling his billfold from his pocket again. "I'll give you half now, half when the job is done." He counted out 10 $100 bills with the casual efficiency of someone who handled that kind of money regularly. The cash sat between them on the counter like a small green mountain. Sarah stared at the money. It was real. More cash than she'd ever seen in one place, enough to solve her immediate problems and buy her breathing room to figure out the rest. "There's a catch," she said. It wasn't a question. There's always a catch. But this one's simple. You don't ask questions about what's in the envelope, you don't look inside it, and you don't discuss this arrangement with anyone. Not Betty, not your neighbors, not your son. No one. The mention of Tommy sent another chill through Sarah, but when she looked at Marcus's face, she saw only the same careful concern he'd shown before. "And if I say no?" Marcus shrugged. "Then you say no. I finish my coffee, you finish your shift, and we both move on with our lives. Though I suspect your landlord might be less understanding about your situation than I am." It wasn't quite pressure, but it wasn't not pressure either. Sarah looked at the money again, then at the clock, then at her phone with Tommy's innocent smile beaming up at her. What choice did she really have? "Okay," she whispered. Marcus smiled, and this time the warmth in it made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Smart choice, Sarah. You won't regret this." But as he gathered the remaining bills from the counter and tucked them back into his billfold, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she already did. The rest of Sarah's shift passed in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. The $1,000 Marcus had left her was safely tucked into her purse, more money than she'd ever carried at one time. Every few minutes she found herself checking to make sure it was still there, that she hadn't imagined the entire encounter. She also found herself thinking about the way Marcus had looked at her, not just with the calculating assessment of a businessman evaluating an asset, but with something warmer, more personal. The memory of his nearness, the scent of his cologne, the way his smile had made her pulse quicken despite her fear, lingered in her mind like an echo. Betty emerged from the back room around 4:30, wiping her hands on a greasy towel and looking satisfied with whatever mechanical battle she'd won. "Got that freezer humming again," she announced, "though Lord knows for how long." "That's great, Betty." Sarah's voice sounded strained even to her own ears. The older woman gave her a sharp look. "You sure you're okay, honey? You've been jumpier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs ever since that fellow left. And you keep touching your purse like you got the crown jewels in there. Just tired. It's been a long night." Betty's tone suggested she wasn't buying it, but she didn't press. That was one of the things Sarah loved about working here. Betty had a talent for knowing when to push and when to let things be. "Well, you get on home soon as 6 rolls around. That boy of yours needs his mama rested." The mention of Tommy sent a fresh wave of guilt through Sarah's chest. What was she doing? She was about to deliver a mysterious envelope for a man she'd met 3 hours ago, a man who'd caught her trying to take from him and turned it into some kind of job offer. Every rational thought she had told her this was insane. But rationality was a luxury she couldn't afford. The $1,000 in her purse was real, and so was the promise of another 1,000 when the job was done. That was security, at least. For a month or two, time to figure out something more permanent. And if she was being honest with herself, there was another reason she couldn't quite bring herself to back out. Marcus intrigued her in a way that no man had in years. There was something magnetic about his quiet confidence, the way he'd turned what should have been her worst moment into an opportunity. He'd looked at her, really looked at her, and seen something worth trusting, worth investing in. At 6 a.m. sharp, Marcus's black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Sarah had been watching for it through the window, her stomach twisted in knots. It tightened with every passing minute. The car was expensive, but not flashy, the kind of vehicle that spoke of wealth without shouting about it. "See you tomorrow night, Betty," Sarah called, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. "You drive safe now," Betty called back. "This heat's got folks driving crazy." The morning air hit Sarah like walking into a furnace. Even at dawn, the temperature had to be pushing 80 degrees, and the sun was already a merciless white disk in the cloudless sky. By afternoon, the asphalt would be hot enough to fry eggs. Marcus rolled down the passenger window as she approached, and despite her nerves, Sarah felt a little thrill at the sight of his smile. "Right on time. I like that." Sarah slid into the car, grateful for the blast of air conditioning that hit her immediately. The interior was immaculate, leather seats, polished wood trim, the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with new car. Smell! It was like stepping into a different world. "Nice car," she said, buckling her seatbelt. "It serves its purpose." Marcus pulled out of the parking lot and onto the empty highway that ran through the heart of town. At this hour, they were virtually alone on the road. "Sleep well last night?" Sarah almost laughed. "I didn't go to sleep. Had to get Tommy ready for day camp, then grab a shower before coming back here." "Day camp? That's good. Keeps him busy. Gives you peace of mind knowing where he is." There was something protective in the way he said it, and Sarah found herself appreciating his understanding of a mother's constant worry. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked. "Motel on the other. East side of town, the Sunset Inn, you know it?" Sarah nodded. She knew it by reputation, if nothing else. The Sunset Inn was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about why someone might need privacy on short notice. Not dangerous, exactly, but not respectable either. "Who am I meeting there?" "A business associate of mine. Nothing for you to worry about." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, sealed and unmarked. He handed it to Sarah, and she was surprised by how light it was. Whatever was inside couldn't be more than a few sheets of paper. "Room 237, Marcus continued. Knock twice, pause, then once. He'll answer. Give him the envelope, wait for him to read it, then come back. Simple as that. Sarah turned the envelope over in her hands. It felt innocent enough, but she'd learned not to trust appearances. What if he's not there? He'll be there. What if he doesn't want to take it? Marcus's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, but when he glanced at her, his expression was reassuring. He'll take it. Trust me. The certainty in his voice was both comforting and unsettling. Sarah tucked the envelope into her purse, next to the $1,000 that was already changing her life. They drove in comfortable silence through the awakening town. Early commuters were beginning to appear, construction workers heading to job sites, nurses finishing night shifts at the hospital, a few dedicated joggers brave enough to face the heat. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that Sarah Chen was sitting in a luxury sedan about to deliver a mysterious envelope to a seedy motel. "Sarah," Marcus said suddenly, his voice softer than before, "I want you to know that I don't take this decision lightly, trusting you with something important to me." She turned to look at him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "Why did you trust me, I mean? You caught me trying to take your money." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. Because desperation makes people honest. When someone's back is truly against the wall, you see who they really are. And what I saw in you, he paused, meeting her eyes briefly before returning his attention to the road. I saw someone worth believing in. The words hit Sarah like a warm wave, and she felt her cheeks flush. When was the last time someone had said something like that to her? When was the last time a man had looked at her and seen potential instead of just another struggling single mother? The Sunset Inn squatted beside Highway 84 like an architectural afterthought, its pink stucco walls faded to the color of old salmon and its neon sign flickering weakly against the brightening sky. Half the letters in vacancy had burned out, leaving Van Nuit to advertise the establishment's dubious charms. Marcus pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the stairs leading to the second floor. 237 is up there, third door from the end. Take your time, but don't linger. In and out. Sarah nodded and opened the car door, immediately hit by another wall of oppressive heat. The asphalt was already beginning to shimmer, and it wasn't even 7 a.m. yet. Before she could get out, Marcus reached over and touched her hand lightly. The contact sent a little shock through her system, and when she looked at him, his pale, green eyes were intense. "Sarah, if anything feels wrong, if the situation doesn't seem right, you walk away. Your safety is more important than any envelope." The genuine concern in his voice made her heart skip. "I'll be careful. I know you will. That's why I chose you." The stairs to the second floor were concrete and steel, designed for function rather than comfort. Sarah's footsteps echoed in the morning stillness as she climbed, the envelope feeling heavier with each step. She found room 237 and paused, checking the number twice to make sure she had it right. 2 knocks. Pause. 1 knock. The door opened almost immediately, as if whoever was inside had been waiting directly behind it. The man who answered was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with thinning brown hair and nervous eyes. He wore a wrinkled dress shirt that had seen better days and khaki pants with a stain on the left knee. "You're not Marcus," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "He sent me. I have something for you." Sarah pulled out the envelope and handed it over. The man's hands were trembling slightly as he took it, and she could see sweat beading on his forehead, despite the early hour. He tore open the envelope with shaking fingers and pulled out what looked like a single sheet of paper. As he read, his face went from pale to grey to a sickly white that made Sarah worry he might faint right there in the doorway. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God. Are you okay?" Sarah found herself asking, though she had a feeling the answer was obvious. The man looked up at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Tell Vale. Tell him I need more time, please. Just a little more time." I'll give him the message. No, you don't understand. The man grabbed her arm, his grip desperate. Tell him about my daughter. She's only 4. She doesn't deserve to pay for my mistakes. Sarah's blood chilled. What are you talking about? But the man had already stepped back and closed the door, leaving her standing alone in the hallway with 1,000 questions and the growing certainty that she'd gotten herself involved in something much darker than a simple delivery job. The drive back to town was tense. Sarah tried to push down her growing unease, reminding herself that Marcus had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. Whatever was happening with this man, there had to be an explanation that made sense. Marcus asked no questions about the exchange as they drove, seeming lost in his own thoughts. But when they pulled into the diner's parking lot, he turned to her with that same warm smile that made her pulse quicken. "Everything go smoothly?" he asked. He seemed scared. People in his position often are. What position is that? Marcus turned to look at her directly, and his pale green eyes held a mixture of regret and determination. "Sarah, part of earning that money is learning when not to ask questions. Some things are better left unknown." It was a gentle rebuke, but a rebuke nonetheless. Sarah nodded, though something cold settled in her stomach. "The rest of your payment," Marcus said, handing her another stack of hundreds, as promised. Sarah took the money, but it felt heavier than it should have. As she started to get out of the car, Marcus's voice stopped her. "Same time tomorrow night?" "Tomorrow? I thought this was a one-time thing. I said the job was simple, not that it was over. My business associate will likely need more time to consider his options. I may need you to make another delivery." Sarah's stomach clenched. "How many more deliveries?" "That depends on how quickly he makes up his mind about certain matters. But don't worry, you'll be compensated for each one." Marcus reached over and touched her hand again, and despite her growing fears, Sarah felt that same electric thrill. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Looking into his eyes, Sarah found herself nodding despite her reservations. There was something about this man that made her want to believe in him, to trust that whatever he was involved in, he wouldn't let her get hurt. "I should get home," she said. "Tommy will be waking up soon." "Of course. Give him my regards." The casual mention of her son should have bothered her, but the way Marcus said it, with genuine warmth and interest, somehow felt natural rather than intrusive. Sarah got out of the car and watched him drive away, the black sedan disappearing into the morning traffic like it had never been there at all. She stood in the parking lot for a long moment, the $2,000 burning in her purse and questions multiplying in her mind like weeds after rain. But underneath her fear and confusion was something else, a flutter of anticipation at the thought of seeing Marcus again tomorrow night. Despite everything, despite the strangeness of their arrangement and the terrified man at the motel, she found herself looking forward to spending more time with him. By the time she got home to her apartment, the heat was already becoming unbearable. The building's air conditioning had never worked properly, and the small window unit in their bedroom was fighting a losing battle against the Nebraska summer. Tommy was still asleep, sprawled across his bed in just his underwear, his hair damp with sweat. Sarah sat on the edge of her own bed and counted the money again, trying to push away the image of the man's terrified face. $2,000. Real money, more than she'd ever had at one time. Enough to pay rent, catch up on utilities, maybe even take Tommy somewhere fun for once. A movie, or that water park in Lincoln he'd been asking about. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Tommy's welcome to stay for lunch if you need to sleep. Poor baby looked tired when I brought him up." Sarah smiled despite her worries. Mrs. Rodriguez was a godsend, a retired grandmother who treated Tommy like her own grandchild and never asked for more than Sarah could afford to pay for babysitting. Some days, Sarah didn't know what she'd do without the older woman's kindness. She was about to text back when another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. "Pleasure doing business with you, Sarah. Rest well, you've earned it." Instead of making her uncomfortable, the message sent a little thrill through her. Marcus was thinking about her, taking the time to check in. It felt caring, personal in a way that went beyond their business arrangement. Sarah typed back, "Thank you. See you tomorrow night." The response came almost immediately. "I'm looking forward to it." The words made her stomach flutter, and Sarah found herself smiling as she drifted off to sleep. Whatever was happening between her and Marcus, whatever complicated situation she'd gotten herself into, at least she didn't feel alone anymore. But her dreams were filled with terrified faces and desperate pleas about 4-year-old daughters. And when she woke 6 hours later to the sound of shouting in the parking lot, the first thing she felt was dread. She stumbled to the window and peered through the blinds, her heart racing. A black sedan, not Marcus's, but similar, was parked next to the dumpster. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, talking to Mrs. Rodriguez. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Even from the second floor, she could see the tension in her neighbor's body language, the way she kept glancing up toward Sarah's apartment. She grabbed her phone and called Mrs. Rodriguez's cell. The older woman answered on the first ring. "Sarah, honey, where are you?" "Upstairs. What's going on down there?" "Some men came asking about you. Said they were insurance investigators, but they didn't look like any insurance people I ever seen. I told them you were at work." "Where's Tommy?" "Right here with me. Don't you worry. He's safe." Sarah's mind raced. Insurance investigators didn't drive luxury sedans or wear suits that expensive. These had to be connected to Marcus somehow, but why would he have people watching her? Unless they weren't his people at all. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you to keep Tommy with you for a while longer. Something's come up." "Of course, honey. But Sarah, be careful. Those men, they had a look about them." Sarah knew exactly what she meant. The look of people who were used to getting what they wanted, one way or another. After hanging up, she paced her small apartment, trying to think. The smart thing would be to call Marcus to find out what was going on. Her phone rang before she could make the decision. Marcus's number. "Sarah, I trust you're resting well." There were men here, asking about me. A pause, and she could hear the concern in his voice when he spoke. "What kind of men?" Mrs. Rodriguez said they claimed to be insurance investigators, but they didn't. "Look like it." Another pause, longer this time. "I see. Where are you now?" "At home." "Good. Stay there. I'm sending someone to keep an eye on things, just as a precaution." "A precaution against what?" "Business complications. Nothing for you to worry about, but it's better to be safe." His voice softened. "Sarah, I want you to know that your safety and Tommy's is my priority. I would never let anything happen to either of you." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten with something that might have been affection. "Why are you doing this? Protecting me, I mean." "Because you matter to me," Marcus said simply. "More than you know." The words hit Sarah like a revelation. When was the last time someone had said she mattered to them? When was the last time she'd felt truly cared for? "Marcus," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know this is complicated," he said gently, "but trust me a little longer. After tomorrow night, things will be clearer." Sarah wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his tone suggested the conversation was over. "I should let you go." "Sarah, one more thing." "Yes?" "You're braver than you think. Don't forget that." The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with her racing thoughts and a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Whatever was happening, whatever danger she might be in, Marcus was thinking about her safety. He cared about her. In her lonely world, that felt like everything. The next 2 days passed in a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Sarah called in sick to her other jobs, something she'd never done before, but the thought of leaving Tommy alone even for a few hours made her stomach churn. The black sedan had returned twice that she'd seen, parked in different locations around the apartment complex, but always within sight of her windows. Mrs. Rodriguez had taken Tommy to the community pool both afternoons, bless her heart, giving Sarah some space to think without having to maintain a facade of normalcy for her son. But thinking was dangerous territory these days. Every train of thought seemed to split between two paths, one that led to growing fear about what she'd gotten involved in, and another that led to thoughts of Marcus, his rare smiles, the way he'd made her feel seen and valued for the first time in years. She found herself checking her phone constantly, hoping for another text from him. When he finally called on the third morning, her heart leaped at the sound of his voice. "Time for another delivery," he said, and she could hear something different in his tone. Tension, maybe, or fatigue. Sarah's stomach clenched with the now familiar mixture of dread and excitement. To the same place? Same place, same room. "But I want you to listen carefully to everything he says this time, every word. It's important that you remember exactly how he responds." "Why?" "Because his time is running out, and I need to know where his head is at." Marcus paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Sarah, I know this situation has become more complicated than either of us expected. But I need you to know that after tonight it should all be resolved." "What kind of resolution?" "The kind where everyone gets what they deserve." There was something final in his voice that made Sarah's skin prickle. "I'll pick you up at the usual time." An hour later, Sarah found herself in Marcus's sedan again, heading toward the Sunset Inn through streets that shimmered with heat mirages. But this time, the atmosphere between them was different, charged with unspoken tensions and the weight of whatever was about to happen. "You seem troubled," Marcus observed, glancing at her as they drove. "I keep thinking about what that man said about his daughter." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What about her? He seemed so scared for her." "I can't stop wondering what he's done that would put a child at risk." "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "sometimes good people make bad choices, and sometimes those choices have consequences that extend beyond just themselves. But she's innocent. Of course she is. Children always are." Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "That's why it's so important that her father makes the right decision now, to protect her." The touch of his hand sent the familiar electric thrill through Sarah, but underneath it was something cold and worried. "Marcus, what exactly is going to happen tonight?" "That depends entirely on how reasonable he's willing to be." They arrived at the motel as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that should have been beautiful but somehow felt ominous. Marcus parked in the same spot as before, but this time he didn't immediately hand her an envelope. "Before you go up there," he said, turning to face her fully, "I want you to know something about us, about what's been happening between us." Sarah's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean that what started as a business arrangement has become something more. At least for me." His pale green eyes searched her face. "These past few days, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your determination to protect your son. Sarah, you've made me remember what it feels like to care about someone." The words hit her like a revelation. She'd felt it too. The growing connection, the way their conversations had become more personal, the electricity that sparked between them every time he touched her hand. "Marcus," she whispered, "I know it's complicated. I know the circumstances aren't ideal. But when this is all over, when things settle down, I'd like to explore what this could be. If you're willing." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had wanted to explore anything with her? When was the last time she'd felt this kind of connection with another person? "I'd like that too," she said softly. Marcus smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, that transformed his entire face. "Good, that's very good." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope, but instead of handing it to her immediately, he held it for a moment. "One last delivery," he said, "and then we can start fresh, both of us." Sarah took the envelope, her fingers brushing, his in a touch that felt like a promise. "I'll be quick. Take your time. I'll be right here waiting." The stairs to the second floor felt different this time. Less ominous, more like steps toward a future she'd never dared to imagine. Whatever was in this envelope, whatever resolution Marcus had planned, it would be the end of this strange chapter in her life and the beginning of something new. She found room 237 and knocked with the familiar pattern. 2 knocks, pause, 1. Knock this time. It took much longer for the door to open. When it finally did, the man who answered looked like he'd been through battle. His face was bruised, his lip was split, and his left eye was swollen nearly shut. "Jesus, what happened to you?" Sarah gasped. "Vale's men found me yesterday afternoon. They wanted to know where I hid the evidence." David's voice was thick and slurred. "I didn't tell them." Sarah's world tilted. "Evidence? What evidence? And who are Vale's men?" David looked at her with something like pity. "You really don't know, do you? You have no idea what you've been working for." "I've been making deliveries, simple deliveries for Marcus Vale. And those weren't simple deliveries, lady. You've been carrying ultimatums, threats, financial pressure." David stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter the room. "Come in. You need to see something." Sarah hesitated, Marcus's words echoing in her mind about not asking questions, but the man's injuries were real and his terror was genuine. She stepped into the room. "Where's your daughter?" she asked, noticing the room's emptiness. "Safe. I sent her away with my sister yesterday morning before they grabbed me." David walked to a briefcase sitting on the room's single chair and pulled out a folder. "Look at this, all of it." Sarah opened the folder and immediately wished she hadn't. Bank records showing hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through accounts with innocuous names, shell companies that existed only on paper, loan documents with interest rates that would make anyone desperate, and photographs, surveillance shots of people who looked terrified, hurt, desperate. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Yeah, that was my reaction too, when I finally figured out what I'd gotten myself into." David sat heavily on the bed, wincing from his injuries. "I used to work for him. I kept his books, managed his accounts, handled his questionable transactions. I thought I was working for a successful businessman. Turns out I was working for someone involved in illegal operations." Sarah's mind reeled. "That's not possible. Marcus he's not like that. He's been kind to me, protective. Of course he has. That's how men like him work. They find people who are vulnerable, people who need help, and they offer them exactly what they need. They make you feel special, chosen, and by the time you realize what you're really involved in, you're in too deep to get out." "No," Sarah said, shaking her head. "You're wrong. Marcus cares about me. He said so himself." "Lady, what's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Marcus Vale doesn't care about anyone except himself. The kindness, the protection, the way he makes you feel special. It's all manipulation. He's using you." "Using me for what?" "To pressure me into giving him what he wants. You think those envelopes you've been delivering contained love letters? They were warnings, implied pressure, each one more intense than the last." Sarah looked down at the envelope. In her hands, her envelope, the final delivery that Marcus had said would resolve everything. "What's in this one?" she asked quietly. "Probably my death sentence." The words hit Sarah like ice water. Everything she believed about Marcus, about their connection, about the possibility of a future together crumbled in an instant. He said he cared about me, that when this was over we could start fresh. David's laugh was bitter, and I'm sure he meant it when he said it. Men like Vale are very good at believing their own lies when it serves their purposes. Sarah's hands were shaking as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, David's daughter Jenny, playing on a swing set at what looked like a school playground. But this wasn't the candid shot of a child at play that Marcus had shown before. This one was taken from close range, with perfect clarity, as if someone had been standing right next to her. On the back of the photograph, in Marcus's precise handwriting, "Last chance, midnight tonight, construction yard on Industrial Boulevard. Come alone, or we visit the school." Sarah's legs gave out and she sank onto the room's single chair. Oh, God, I'm so sorry." "You didn't know," David said gently. "How could you? He's a master at making people believe exactly what he needs them to believe. But I should have seen it. The secrecy, the money, the way he always seemed to know things he shouldn't know." Sarah pressed her palms against her eyes. "How could I be so stupid?" "You weren't stupid. You were desperate. And desperate people make the best targets because they want so badly to believe that someone cares enough to help them." Sarah looked at the photograph again, at the little girl who looked so much like Tommy, innocent, trusting, unaware that adults could use children as leverage in their ugly games. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "We? I got you into this. Deeper. Those envelopes, those warnings, I delivered them. I'm responsible." Sarah stood up, sudden determination replacing her shock. "I'm going to help you get out of this." "How?" Sarah pulled out her phone and opened the camera app. "I need you to tell me everything about Marcus's operation, names, places, bank accounts, everything. And I need you to say it while I'm recording. Why? Because if something happens to you tonight, someone needs to know the truth. And because maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to stop him." For the next hour, David talked while Sarah recorded. He laid out Marcus Vale's entire illegal enterprise in methodical detail: the financial misconduct schemes, the unlawful loan operations, the network of corrupt officials who looked the other way. He named names, gave addresses, provided account numbers. When he was finished, Sarah uploaded the video to a cloud storage account she'd set up on her phone. "Insurance," she said. "If Marcus tries to silence you, this goes to the FBI automatically. And if he tries to silence you," Sarah had thought about that too, "then Mrs. Rodriguez has instructions to contact a reporter I know in Omaha. The whole story comes out." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than nothing. David looked at her with something like hope in his battered face. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I have a son too, and because I'm tired of being used." Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. "And because I believed in someone who turned out to be a lie, and I need to do something right to balance that out." At 11:30, Sarah drove David to the construction yard. She parked across the street, hidden behind a billboard advertising a payday loan company. Fitting, she thought grimly. Last chance to run, she told David. Can't, he'll never stop hunting us. This ends tonight one way or another. David got out of the car and walked toward the chain-link gate. Sarah watched him disappear into the shadows of the construction equipment, and her heart hammered against her ribs. Her phone rang. "I assume he's inside?" Marcus asked, and his voice was different now, colder, more businesslike. "Yes." "Good. You can go home now, Sarah. Your part in this is finished." "What's going to happen to him?" "He's going to face consequences for his choices." "What kind of consequences?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "The permanent kind." The casual way he said it made Sarah's stomach lurch. This was the man she'd been falling for. This was the person she'd thought cared about her. "Marcus," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What about us? What you said earlier about starting fresh?" His laugh was soft and cold. "Sarah, you're a sweet woman, and you served your purpose well. But surely you didn't think this was real? A man like me with a woman like you." The words hit her like physical blows. "A woman like me? A desperate single mother who resorts to taking things that don't belong to her. Come now, Sarah, you were useful, but let's not pretend this was a fairy tale." Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, but something deeper. Her faith in her own judgment, maybe. Her ability to trust her instincts about people. "You used me," she whispered. "I gave you exactly what you needed. Money, purpose, the illusion of being wanted. You should be grateful." The line went dead. Sarah sat in her car, staring at the construction yard, and realized she couldn't leave. Whatever was about to happen, David shouldn't face it alone. And maybe, just maybe, she could still do something right. She got out of the car and approached the fence. The gate was open, and she could see lights on in one of the warehouses. Voices carried on the night air, Marcus's cultured tones and David's desperate pleas. Sarah crept closer, using parked bulldozers and cement mixers for cover. Through a window, she could see into the warehouse. Marcus stood in the center of the space, looking calm and composed. David was on his knees in front of him, and two large men in dark suits flanked him. Sarah pulled out her phone and started recording again. "The evidence, David," Marcus was saying. "Where is it? I told you. It's hidden. If anything happens to me—" Yes, your insurance policy, very clever. But here's the thing, I don't think you're clever enough to have set up a dead man's switch. I think you're bluffing." One of the men grabbed David's arm and twisted it behind his back. David cried, out in pain, "I'm not bluffing. I swear, Marcus, if you harm me, who said anything about harming you permanently?" Marcus pulled a weapon from his jacket, a small, efficient-looking piece that gleamed under the warehouse lights. "I'm just going to hurt you until you tell me what I want to know. And if that doesn't work, well, I know where your sister lives now. I know which school little Jenny attends." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She had to do something, but what? She was one person against three men, and she had no weapon, no backup, no plan beyond bearing witness. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number, FBI. We're outside. Stay down." Sarah's heart nearly stopped. How could the FBI be here? Unless... She thought about the video she'd uploaded, the cloud storage account, the automatic emails she'd set up as insurance. Had someone intercepted them? Was help really on the way? Floodlights suddenly blazed to life around the warehouse, turning night into day. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "FBI, this is Agent Morrison. The building is surrounded." Through the window, Sarah saw Marcus's face go white with rage and fear. The two men with him drew devices, and David scrambled away from them on hands and knees. "How?" Marcus snarled. "How did they—" His gaze fell on Sarah's face in the window, and understanding dawned in his eyes. "You," he whispered, and all the fake charm was gone, replaced by pure malice. Sarah ran. She heard loud pops behind her, shouts, the sound of vehicles moving fast. She threw herself behind a cement truck just as projectiles started flying in her direction. The next few minutes were chaos. More FBI agents poured through the gate, tactical gear gleaming under the floodlights. There were more sounds of conflict, screams, the metallic sound of restraints clicking into place. When the commotion stopped, Sarah cautiously emerged from her hiding place. Marcus was on the ground in zip-tie restraints, traces of something dark seeping from a wound in his shoulder. His two associates were also restrained, and David Chen was sitting on the tailgate of an ambulance, getting his injuries treated by a paramedic. Agent Morrison, a tall, thin man with graying hair and tired eyes, approached Sarah. Miss Chen, we need to talk. How did you know to be here? Your video, the one your friend David sent to our Omaha field office this afternoon. We've been trying to build a case against Vale for 2 years, but we could never get close enough. Your recording gave us probable cause for surveillance, and when we saw him bringing you and David here tonight, Morrison shrugged. Sometimes cases break when you least expect them to. Sarah looked over at Marcus, who was glaring at her with undiluted hatred as paramedics worked on his shoulder. All the warmth, all the charm, all the supposed caring, it had all been an act. What happens now? She asked. Now we build an airtight case. David's testimony, your recordings, the evidence he compiled over the years, Vale's going away for a very long time. And me? Morrison studied her face. You were coerced into illegal activity under implied pressure. You're a victim, not a perpetrator. Though we'll need your full cooperation as this moves through the system. Sarah nodded. Of course. There is one thing, though. Morrison's expression grew serious. Vale had connections throughout this area. Police, city officials, judges. Some of them are going to be very nervous when this story comes out. You might want to consider relocating, at least until the dust settles. The suggestion hit Sarah like cold water. Leave Nebraska? Leave the only home Tommy had ever known? I don't have anywhere to go. The Bureau has a witness protection program. It's not just for mob informants. We help people who've been pressured by illegal operations. Is that what this was? An illegal operation? Morrison looked at the construction yard with its legitimate equipment hiding illegitimate business. What would you call it? Sarah had no answer for that. 3 hours later, Sarah was finally allowed to leave. David Chen had been taken to the hospital for treatment of his injuries, and Marcus Vale was in federal custody. Sarah drove home through the empty streets of her town, watching the familiar landmarks roll past in the pre-dawn darkness. Everything looked the same, but she felt like a different person than the woman who'd left here a few hours ago. The woman who'd tried to take Marcus's billfold had been desperate and frightened, willing to do anything to solve her immediate problems. The woman driving home now understood that some problems couldn't be solved by taking shortcuts or accepting help from dangerous men. More importantly, she understood that her worth wasn't determined by whether someone like Marcus Vale found her useful or attractive. She'd been so starved for validation, so desperate to feel valued, that she'd mistaken manipulation for genuine care. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting for her when she got home, sitting on the front steps of the apartment building despite the late hour. Tommy's. Asleep upstairs, she said without preamble. Safe and sound, but you look like you've been through a war. Sarah sat down next to her neighbor, suddenly exhausted. I think I have been. Want to talk about it? I don't think I can, not yet. But Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to tell you something. We might have to leave town, start over somewhere else. The older woman was quiet for a long moment. Well, she said finally, if you do, you make sure you write. And if you don't, you remember that home isn't just a place. It's the people who care about you, really care about you, not just when it serves their purposes. Sarah felt tears threatening for the first time since this nightmare had begun. I'm gonna miss you. You're not gone yet, and maybe you won't have to go at all. Maybe things will work out differently than you think. Sarah hoped she was right, but she'd learned not to count on hope alone. The next few weeks passed in a blur of FBI interviews, legal proceedings, and media attention. The story of Marcus Vale's illegal enterprise made headlines throughout the state. Corrupt businessman using construction company as front for financial misconduct and unlawful pressure tactics, brought down by brave bookkeeper and single mother, who risked their lives to expose him. Sarah hated the attention, hated being called brave when she felt like she'd just been lucky to survive her own poor judgment. But the money helped. The FBI's reward program for information leading to conviction of unlawful network operators was substantial, and Sarah found herself with more financial security than she'd ever imagined. She could afford a better apartment now, in a safer part of town. She could send Tommy to a better school, take him to that water park in Lincoln he'd been wanting to visit. She could even think about going back to college, finishing the degree she'd abandoned when she got pregnant. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was living on borrowed time. Marcus Vale's trial wouldn't begin for months, and until then, she was the key witness in a case that had exposed corruption throughout the local power structure. The decision came 3 months later, when Agent Morrison called with news that changed everything. "We found something in Vale's personal files," he said without preamble. "A list of names, people he considered problems or liabilities. You're on it, Sarah. So is your son." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What kind of list?" "The kind that people like Vale use to settle scores when they think they're not going to prison. The kind that gets passed along to associates who might want to curry favor with him." "You're saying I'm marked for retaliation?" "I'm saying you're not safe here anymore. Neither is Tommy." That night, Sarah sat Tommy down and tried to explain why they had to leave the only home he'd ever known. He cried, as she'd expected, and asked why the bad men couldn't just leave them alone. She didn't have a good answer for that. But as she tucked him into bed, Sarah realized something had changed in her. The woman who'd reached for Marcus's billfold, out of desperation, was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth. She'd been used, yes, but she'd also found the strength to do the right thing when it mattered most. They left Nebraska on a Tuesday morning in late September, when the summer heat had finally broken and the leaves were just beginning to turn. Sarah packed everything they owned into her Honda Civic, which wasn't much, but it was theirs. Mrs. Rodriguez stood in the parking lot as they loaded the car. She'd given Tommy a box of homemade cookies for the road and pressed an envelope into Sarah's hands. "Don't open it until you get where you're going," she said. Sarah promised she wouldn't. As they drove west toward Colorado, where the FBI had arranged new identities and a fresh start for them, Sarah found herself thinking not about what she was leaving behind, but about what lay ahead. She was no longer Sarah Chen, the desperate single mother who made bad choices out of fear. She was becoming Sarah Collins, a woman who understood that real strength came from within, not from the validation of others. Tommy fell asleep in the passenger seat as they crossed the state line, his head pillowed on the stuffed dinosaur Mrs. Rodriguez had bought him. Sarah looked at his peaceful face and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine hope. They drove through the morning into a landscape of possibilities, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah felt truly free. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window of the small house on Maple Street, catching the dust motes that danced in the warm air. Sarah Collins, she was completely comfortable with the new name now, poured coffee into a travel mug and checked the clock on the microwave. 7:15. Tommy would be up soon, demanding pancakes and chattering about his new friends at school. The woman who lived here had a single job at the hospital that paid enough to cover rent and groceries, with a little left over. She had a small garden in the backyard, where she grew tomatoes and peppers, and neighbors who brought over casseroles and invited her to backyard barbecues. She also had a folder in her bedroom closet labeled Legal Documents that contained her new identity papers, the address of her FBI contact, and instructions for what to do if Marcus Vale or any of his associates ever found them. Agent Morrison called every few weeks to check in. Vale's trial was progressing slowly, but the evidence was solid. The conviction was all but certain. Sarah's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, a text from an unknown number. Her blood froze for just a moment. Old habits died hard, but when she opened the message, her heart skipped for an entirely different reason. "Hi, Sarah. It's Ben from the hospital. I know this is probably out of line, but would you like to have coffee sometime? No pressure. Ben Martinez Maintenance. Sarah smiled. Ben was the guy who'd fixed her computer last month, and then her desk lamp the week after. And then had started finding reasons to stop by her department every few days, just to chat. He was kind, funny, and had the most genuine smile she'd ever seen. He also had an 8-year-old daughter from his previous marriage who, according to the pictures on his desk, looked like she'd get along perfectly with Tommy. Sarah had been so focused on rebuilding their life, on staying safe and keeping Tommy happy, that she hadn't allowed herself to think about the possibility of letting someone new into their world. But Ben wasn't Marcus. He didn't offer solutions that were too good to be true. He didn't make her feel desperate or grateful. Instead, he made her feel seen, valued, like she was interesting just for being herself. She typed back, "I'd love to." Saturday morning. The response came almost immediately. "Perfect. I know a place that makes pancakes almost as good as yours." Sarah laughed out loud. She'd brought Tommy to the hospital employee picnic last month, and Ben had watched her flip. Pancakes for a dozen kids with what she now recognized as admiration rather than calculation. "Mom, why are you smiling at your phone?" Tommy appeared in the doorway, his hair sticking up in every direction and his dinosaur pajamas wrinkled from sleep. "Just got some good news, baby." "What kind of good news?" Sarah considered how to explain it. "The kind where someone nice wants to spend time with us." Tommy processed this with the seriousness of an 8-year-old. "Like a friend? Maybe. We'll see." "Does he like dinosaurs?" "I don't know yet, but we can ask him." Tommy nodded, apparently satisfied with this plan. "Can we have pancakes?" "Of course we can have pancakes." As Sarah mixed batter and heated the griddle, she thought about choices and consequences, about the difference between desperation and hope, between being used and being valued. She thought about Marcus Vale, sitting in his federal holding cell, paying for his choices. She thought about David Chen, who'd sent her a Christmas card from his new home in Oregon, where he was rebuilding his life with his daughter. Most of all, she thought about the night she'd reached for a stranger's billfold and set in motion a chain of events that had cost her everything she'd thought she wanted and given her everything she'd never known she needed. The pancakes sizzled on. The griddle, golden and perfect. Outside, her neighbor Patricia was working in her garden, and the mailman was making his rounds, and the world was going about its ordinary business of living and breathing and moving forward. Tommy appeared at her elbow, drawn by the smell of breakfast. "They smell really good, Mom. They're almost ready. Go wash your hands." As he ran off to the bathroom, Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was Patricia from next door. "Beautiful morning. Want to walk the dogs together after you get home from work? Also, that Martinez fellow from your work seems nice." Sarah typed back, "I'd love to walk the dogs." And yes, he does seem nice. She meant it. She'd love to walk dogs with her neighbor, to talk about ordinary things like weekend plans and which grocery store had the best sales. She'd love to be Sarah Collins, who worked at the hospital and grew tomatoes, and was maybe, possibly, carefully opening her heart to someone new. The woman who'd tried to take Marcus Vale's billfold was gone, buried under new choices and hard-won wisdom. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd learned that real love didn't come with strings attached. Real care didn't require gratitude, and real worth came from within. Tommy came back with clean hands and a hopeful expression. "Are they ready?" Sarah stacked 3 golden pancakes on his plate and watched him drown them in syrup with the enthusiasm only a child could muster. Her phone buzzed one more time. "Agent, Morrison's number. Marcus Vale passed away while in federal custody yesterday morning. Natural causes. You're safe now. Case closed." Sarah stared at the text for a long moment, then deleted it and set her phone aside. She felt nothing, no relief, no satisfaction, no sadness. Marcus Vale had been a chapter in her life that was already closed. His passing didn't change who she was now or where she was going. "Mom, you're smiling again," Tommy observed around a mouthful of pancake. "I guess I am." "Good smiles or worried smiles?" "Good smiles, baby. Definitely good smiles." And as the morning sun filled their kitchen with warm light, and Tommy chatted about his plans for the day, and Sarah thought about coffee dates and dog walks and all the ordinary possibilities that lay ahead, she realized she meant it completely. She was home, not in a place, but in herself. Finally, truly, safely home. The end. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please support the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments so you don't miss the next episodes. See you in the next story.